Hey guys, welcome back to Medical Coding with Blue. It is Christmas in July. Today we are talking about my other favorite clinic, which is podiatry. If you're brand new to my channel, welcome. Happy Christmas in July. I am Blue. I'm a medical coder. I have been a medical coder for over 10 years. I really love sharing the things that I know with all of you. So I hope you'll take a second, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and at the end of this video helps you, I hope that you will share it. Okay, so let's get started. All right, podiatry. So, a few fun facts about podiatry. This one coming from arthritis.org. Anatomy of the foot. Each foot is made up of 28 bones, 30 joints, and more than 100 muscles, tendons, and ligaments, all of which work together to provide support, balance, and mobility. So how many bones are in your big toe? The big toe, aka the hallux, okay? From Healthline, each toe consists of 3 separate bones and 2 joints, except for the big toes, which has only 2 bones each. The distal and proximal phalanges, okay, and 1 joint, like the thumb in the hand. And I'm going to include a very good article from arthritis.org down in the description box below, so you can use it as a reference. It talks about everything, okay? The anatomy of the foot. Now, something that I found fascinating about AAPC, I am an AHIMA member, so, but I do share with you guys information about AAPC as well, even though this is not an ad for AAPC or AHIMA because they don't pay me. But I give you guys all the information that you need because I think it's important to share everything, okay? So AAPC has a certified surgical foot and ankle coder credential. This is the CSFAC credential. Now, when it comes to like the specialty credentials like this, I haven't seen anybody asking for this specifically. However, it does not mean that it's not desired, okay? So if podiatry is your gig and you really like podiatry, or perhaps you work at a podiatrist's office and they will pay for you to get this, or you want to have more on your resume than just a standard coding credential, that may be something that you want to look into. Okay, so the code ranges. Some fall under the Chapter 12, the diseases of skin and subcutaneous tissue, from L00 to L99. Some fall under the musculoskeletal range for podiatry, M00 to M99. Diagnoses that are related to podiatry can also be found under the neoplasm section, signs and symptoms section, the infections, and injuries. You know how much I love my injuries. So, important things to remember. If coding ulcers, right, pressure ulcers, what stage is it? This is probably one of the ones that gets the bit of information that would make that documentation much more complete. So this is part of clinical documentation improvement. As medical coders, we don't necessarily have to have this title, but we can perform this function because this is what coding is all about. It is about making sure that all the detail is there and all of the information to make the coding as specific as possible is there, okay? Now, other things is, was a diabetic foot exam performed? Is very important with podiatrists when it comes to documentation about diabetes. If the patient is a diabetic patient and there's anything related to the diabetes and the foot and all of this other stuff, then it needs to be documented, particularly if that provider is treating it. It can't be just that the patient has this or that. It's got to be like, okay, what all is going on with this patient? And does this patient have like atherosclerosis as well? Do they have anything else? You know, those are the more detailed, like long-term comorbidities that are involved when you're in the podiatry setting. It's not just your general foot exams. A lot of times these are very sensitive patients who have lots of conditions that are very sensitive. I mean, With diabetic patients, you know, it's very dangerous for them to get even one little scratch on their foot, okay? So that's why the podiatrists are trained for these things. Make sure that if they're doing that as part of their exam, that they're documenting it as well, okay? Apply the toe modifiers as appropriate. It will not be appropriate on every procedure code. Understanding the language of the procedure codes is huge, okay? I talked about this before about if it says how many nails, okay, it's not asking you to code for, it's not asking for the specific nail modifier, okay, because it knows that there is a nail in there. So if it's nails, like a removal of nails, that's something that you need to make sure that you're looking at when you are applying these modifiers. Using the toe modifier is a good way to do this. With that 50 modifier, because you know it's bilateral, right? Say for example, the patient gets a injection into each big toe, the right big toe and the left big toe, right? Or correct. And so you may be tempted to put the 20600, which is injection into the small joint, right? Which would be the toes. You may be tempted to put the 50 modifier, but that's not the case. You have to put the big toes, the toe modifiers, okay? And I can't think of them off the top of my head, but you have to put the individual toe modifiers on each procedure code. So that is something to make sure that you are aware of, okay? If you can apply that individual toe modifier, then do that, okay? Another thing that I wanted to talk about, LISFRANC fractures. Now, you may see this, and it happens a lot. It happens when the patient spends a lot of time like with their foot like this. It happens a lot with football. Right? At the beginning of football season, we'll see a lot of LISFRANC fractures, okay? Because that area gets stressed right here. And they say that it's a LISFRANC fracture, right? It's actually codes out to a dislocation. It doesn't code out to a LISFRANC fracture. It codes out to a dislocation, okay? So that is something to be aware of as well. That LISFRANC fracture diagnosis is something crazy. And I will leave a link for LISFRANC fractures down in the description box below, so that way you can look into it. But as a podiatry coder, that is something that you're going to see a lot. And I've gotten many emails from people very frustrated. Blue, I can't find LISFRANC fracture. It actually codes out to a dislocation, okay? So the other thing is, the example from the ICD-10 CM Optum 360 coding book. This is not an ad for Optum 360. However, you guys know how much I love Optum 360. They have at the beginning of every chapter in their in the tabular section. I was gonna say index. In the tabular section, at the beginning of every chapter, it breaks down a whole page. It talks about specific rules. For that section, it also gives examples of when you would use particular codes or particular scenarios, or what you should do. So one of the examples that I wanted to read from the book, this comes from the book itself, Optum 360, the ICD-10 CM Expert for Physicians. That's the book that I trust. That's the book that I use. So it says, the patient is admitted with pressure ulcers documented as healed. No code is assigned if the documentation states that the pressure ulcer is completely healed at the time of admission. Okay, so you would code the Z09, encounter for follow-up exam after completed treatment for conditions other than malignant neoplasm, followed by the Z87.2, personal history of diseases of the skin and subcutaneous tissue. Why that? Because a pressure ulcer obviously falls under the skin. That's when you're going to find it, okay? That's what you're going to think of when you're thinking of what is this a history of, okay? It's a pressure ulcer. So this is diseases of the skin and subcutaneous tissue. So it goes on to say, assign only codes for the reason for the encounter and the personal history of a pressure ulcer. Personal history code Z87.2 includes conditions classifiable to L00 to L99, such as a pressure ulcer. Like I just said, no code is assigned for a pressure ulcer documented as completely healed. Then that's when you would switch it over to that history of code, okay? Particularly if they're getting treatment for that history of. Okay, they're just making sure you're checking them out, making sure that everything's okay and healed and things like that. So always remember that. If you do have an Optum 360 ICD-10 book, check it out. Look in the beginning section. It is really going to help you to understand these details a little bit more. And what else can I say about podiatry? When you have, there's a matrixectomy, right? It's a nail and bed removal, okay? And it has a 10-day global period on it. So if a patient comes back in during that time, it is going to be encountered for aftercare following surgery for skin and subcutaneous tissue, okay? So that's something to remember, that if it's anything with the nails, obviously it's gonna fall under the skin, because nails, hair, that the skin fall under the integumentary system. So that's how you know what aftercare code to apply, okay? And then anything outside of that global period, if they come back like a month later for a follow-up, then you would use that Z09 for a follow-up if there's nothing else going on, and then a history of code for like the ingrown. So the ingrown falls under that L series, right? The skin and subcutaneous tissue. So then you would use that that history of code for other diseases of the skin and subcutaneous tissue. So that is something to look at when you are looking at conditions for the foot, okay? Plantar fasciitis is another one. That code comes up to the specific code comes up to plantar fascial fibromatosis. There is no specific code that reads out plantar fasciitis, which is an argument that I have often gotten with podiatrists before. But this is just the language of the book and understanding it. But if you look in the coding companion, right, in the ICD-10, ICD-10 is a coder desk reference for diagnoses. It does tell you that the plantar fasciitis is covered under that plantar fascial fibromatosis code. Okay, so that's it on that one. Anytime you're looking at injuries on the foot, whether it is that they got smashed in the foot by something falling on their foot, and that's how they fractured their foot or whatever, make sure that you're getting all of that data. Make sure that the external cause code is being carried through the entire time when they are getting treatment for that injury, okay? That is something that's very important. Sometimes people don't put a lot of emphasis on that because they don't really understand. But when it comes to the external causes of injuries, right? And I'm just talking about the external cause, the one that ends in the letter, okay? Not the one that's like the activity codes or what you were doing or your employment status or whatever. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the external cause codes. Like, say for instance, a person has a fracture of the big toe because they had a weight, like for the gym. It fell on their foot, right? So they were struck by an object, okay? I think there is one. It may not be, but I think it's just struck by an object. So you want to make sure that the documentation is showing what happened, what caused this fracture. So at least that way, those two codes, at least if it's a minimum of two, which is the fracture code if it's a fracture, and then the external cause code, how did it happen? They're always getting picked up throughout that care, okay? You won't need the activity codes or whatever after the first initial visit, okay? Because that's the first time that it's reported, and that's how it goes. But that external cause code does need to be carried through. Like I said, I've seen a lot of people not put emphasis on it like they should. You really should. And if a provider is putting up a fight, it is because they need to be educated that it is important to carry this data on through, because even though they're healing, or hopefully they're healing, they still need to know why. Every encounter in the outpatient setting stands alone, okay? So we can only go by what is on that documentation. It's not like the inpatient where we have the entire record to look at, right? This is requiring you to just look at what you have in front of you. What is the information that you have? What is it saying to you? And so this is why we need to make sure that all of this information is complete. Okay, so that is pretty much what I have to say about podiatry. Podiatry is very fascinating. However, it is a very small area of the body, but it's got lots going on. But you know what they say about small packages. So anyway, I hope that you will check these different links out. Read the beginning section if you got the ICD-10 CM book, the Optum 360 version. Make sure you're looking into those. Read carefully the descriptions of procedures so that way you know what kind of modifiers it's looking for, okay? And always make sure that all of the information is documented, the laterality, which toe got nails removed, and things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. So that was podiatry. Tomorrow is urology. So I will see y'all back for that one. So if you are a medical coder, a medical coding student, somebody curious about the fascinating world of medical coding, a provider or a nurse, I invite you to like and subscribe and follow me on my journey in medical coding. I will see y'all next time. Bye.